The first large frame metallic cartridge revolver to be offered on the American market to widespread success was the Smith & Wesson Model 3. Model 3 is a term that refers to all the large frame Smith & Wesson revolvers made from 1870 to about the turn of the century. There are a number of variations in that model: the American, the Russian, the Schofield, the new model number 3, and double action models. But the very first is what's come to be known as the American model, and it was an instant success.
It's in the speed of reloading that the big Smith & Wessons really give you an advantage, especially in a gunfight. What you do is you pull the hammer slightly back, you open the top latch here, and then when you go to open a Smith & Wesson, the extractor comes up and kicks out all 6 cartridges at the same time. It also allows you to rapidly reload all 6 chambers, and you're back in the fight.
A U.S. Army officer, George Schofield, was familiar with the Smith & Wesson Americans that had been issued to the Army, and he was a huge fan. He thought he could improve this design. He saw the thumb latch as being a problem, that the gun had to have 2 hands to open the cylinder. He designed, patented, and introduced a gun that could be opened one hand. And as a cavalry officer, he thought this was important for mounted use. With the Schofield latch, the latch is simply pulled back with the thumb, and then the gun can be opened one-handed, automatically eject the empty cartridges, and expose for reloading, which he thought would be a significant advantage on horseback.
Smith & Wesson's largest success with its big top brakes came with the Russian government. America was really a leader in manufacturing technology. They led off with the American system of manufacture and interchangeable parts. This was a very good gun, the Russian, and it was adopted by the Tsarist government in 1870. Literally tens of thousands of guns were made for the Russians, and they even made them themselves. The Smith & Wesson Russian kept that company in business.
This is where you get into the question of how do you know a particular individual used a particular gun. If you look at the famous gunfight at OK Corral, it's traditionally pictured in movies and television as a battle using Colt single-action armies. And a very strong argument can be made that a majority of the people participating in that fracas were in fact carrying the big old peacemakers. However, if you dig into it a little bit, you can find sources that will tell you that Wyatt Earp was carrying a Smith & Wesson American model. Virgil Earp was carrying a new model number 3. Doc Holliday was carrying a Colt conversion revolver, and the McLaurys were carrying a Schofield and a Smith & Wesson Russian. So it's very possible that the majority of the 6 guns actually used at the OK Corral were Smith & Wessons instead of Colts. In 1878, Smith & Wesson discontinued production of the American, Russian, and Schofield models and introduced their final top brake single action, the new model number 3. The new model number 3 was the perfection of the Smith & Wesson large frame top brake. They reduced the radical knuckle on the Russian model to a very manageable model, and a grip frame that proved very popular. This basic grip configuration is still used on revolvers today. They had improved it mechanically. Turned out to be probably the most accurate revolver of the late 19th century, and it also gained a good following in the American West.